And like so many parents, we think constantly about how to embrace.
In looking forward to this very special occasion, I reflected on the importance of this achievement
While safeguarding against its dangers and that hopeful intention of.
Imagine a high-rise Manhattan suite alive with chaos, stylists darting between racks, assistants glued to their phones, and publicists triple-checking every last detail. Meghan calls it their big comeback moment. Across the room, Prince Harry stands at the window staring out over the New York skyline, that look saying, "This is it. This is when everyone remembers why we matter." The Humanitarian Awards in NYC had invited them as star guests. Cameras prepped. Headlines practically writing themselves. Everything looked flawless. The outfit, the security, the route, every last bit of travel, especially the flight. Then the phone rang. One word changed the mood. No. Not maybe. Not we'll see. Just no. The request for a fully sponsored private jet was denied. For a couple accustomed to hearing yes, that single syllable hit hard. It wasn't about transportation. It was about respect. About being told they're not sitting quite as high on the pedestal they imagined. And that right there is where things got interesting. Quick reminder, subscribe if you love complex celebrity stories told right. Because what unfolds next explains exactly how a single no turned into a worldwide headline. To understand why the rejection stung, you have to rewind a few weeks to Paris. Fashion Week. Meghan arrived expecting triumph. Front row at Balenciaga, cameras blazing, shoulders back, chin up, every inch the headline queen making her grand re-entry. On paper, perfection. Designer look, camera flashes, every symbol of relevance. But the vibe? Sub-zero. No one rushing up for hugs or selfies. In the world of couture, warmth equals approval, and cold politeness means you've slipped off the guest list that matters. The whispers through the crowd weren't complimentary. That sleek dress? Not custom. Borrowed, and the tag's still on. In that world, tags are code for you're a temporary guest, not an insider. The message was silent but cutting. Designers create for their chosen muses, not for courtesy loans. She sat tall while photographers clicked, yet the people nearest gave those careful smiles that never reached their eyes. The kind that make a room feel emptier than an empty room ever could. Then came the drive. The one through that Paris tunnel, where Princess Diana's story ended. Reports claimed Meghan had no clue about the location's history. But insiders raised eyebrows immediately. Paris sprawls. You don't accidentally choose the most symbolic tunnel in royal history. Many suspected choreography, an intentional echo of Diana's mystique to conjure sympathy and legacy. Whether true or not, public perception locked in quickly. Perception is power, and once it flips, recovery is brutal. By the time she flew out, cameras still snapped, but all warmth had drained. In celebrity diplomacy, polite recognition equals the kiss of irrelevance. And nobody in fashion wants to stand beside yesterday's fascination. That Paris trip, which should have been a confident stride back to relevance, turned into a cautionary mirror reflecting how quickly the spotlight can chill. So, when the NYC Awards appeared on the calendar, Meghan saw her chance for redemption. New city, new audience, a new story to tell. This time, every frame would count. Glam team? Booked. Timing? Atomic clock precise. The route? Locked. Security? Layered. Jet? Essential. Because arriving wasn't enough, arriving correctly mattered. She needed that red carpet gasp, that collective moment of reversal, see? Still royal, still relevant. To most, the Humanitarian Gala symbolized charity, humility, and service. To their team, it symbolized narrative reset, Paris who? The awards honor people creating real change through unseen work, not those courting headlines. But once Team Sussex took over logistics, the event began morphing into an orchestrated showcase. Emails swirled, requests for flattering lighting, curated backstage arrangements, specific bottled water brands. None outrageous on their own, but together, they shifted the tone. And among all those details, one request stood out. They wanted the jet costs covered. Not just any jet, a private aircraft, fully funded by the sponsors. Their reps insisted it was necessity, not luxury. Their reasoning? Crowd chaos. Cameras. Phones. Endless commotion if they flew commercial. At first glance, plausible. Security matters. But context kills excuses fast. The optics of asking benefactors at a humanitarian event to bankroll luxury travel were disastrous. It diluted the message, humility canceled by hubris. As one organizer privately put it, if you're honoring service, maybe don't start by serving yourself. Not sarcasm, just truth. Other honorees that evening were genuine grassroots heroes, people flying economy, grabbing budget taxis, thrilled simply to celebrate their causes. Against that backdrop, the Sussex request looked tone-deaf. The decision came swiftly, denied. No fuss, no public shaming, just a polite, professional decline. Inside their circle, that no exploded like a flashbang. Years of doors opening automatically had trained them otherwise. In their world, denied didn't exist. It meant someone had failed to understand their importance. Their team scrambled to reframe it as scheduling trouble, a mix-up, anything but rejection. But everyone involved knew this was deliberate. It wasn't merely no to a plane. It was no to privilege without purpose. For a pair defined by global headlines, that reversal cut deep. Harry's response reportedly mixed disbelief and irritation. He'd championed mental health humility, yet here they were arguing for private luxury under the humanitarian banner. It felt contradictory, even self-defeating. Their public commitment to empathy clashed with a private expectation of exception. To defend their request, Harry's team pointed directly back to Paris. They described chaos, photographers giving chase, cameras blinding their path, the city turning into a movie scene. Security risk, they said. Proof they couldn't fly commercial this time. But people who had actually been there told a different story. That Paris chase didn't erupt from nowhere. Word of Meghan's movements had circulated well in advance: venue times, departure details, estimated routes. Photographers weren't lurking by coincidence. They were positioned carefully, waiting for the perfect shot. Whether the leaks came from within her camp or through the usual entertainment grapevine didn't really change the end perception. It looked organized, coordinated, predictable. Far from a spontaneous ambush, it felt like a planned photo opportunity that veered slightly sideways. And that infamous tunnel ride, the one echoing Diana's tragedy, became the centerpiece of speculation. Insiders whispered that every professional involved in their Paris stay knew the city inside out. If avoiding that specific location was truly crucial for emotional or symbolic reasons, plenty of other routes existed. Somehow, the convoy still chose that path. Her spokespeople insisted it was coincidence. But coincidence loses credibility when your itinerary is managed down to the minute by a team whose job is anticipating every variable. Even some longtime supporters privately admitted the explanation strained belief. The conclusion forming among observers was uncomfortable. The danger might have been dramatized for effect, which made New York's rejected jet request look less like a safety measure and more like an attempted power play. By this point, the pattern was obvious. They weren't demanding privacy, they were demanding control, over angles, over framing, over every captured image. Everything had to serve the narrative. When the organizers said no, they weren't rejecting the Sussexes personally. They were rejecting that level of orchestration. The message was simple: show up on equal terms or skip the show. Powerful words in an environment where equal terms rarely apply. The media caught whispers of tension, adding fuel to debate. Some commentators framed it as another royal snub, others as a necessary wake-up call. What everyone agreed on was that the dynamic had shifted. Not dramatically, but unmistakably. Behind closed doors at Foundation headquarters, the conversation stayed professional. Someone asked, if we pay for a private jet for two celebrities, what message does that send to the volunteers and teachers we're honoring the same night? There was no good answer that didn't sound hypocritical. They reviewed who else was attending: community leaders, activists, people who'd built schools in remote towns or staffed clinics in low-resource regions. None of them had sponsorships to fly first class, let alone private. The logic became airtight. Harry and Meghan undeniably bring attention. They drive headlines, trending tags, algorithmic spikes, video views. The marketing value is real. But along with influence comes the baggage: polarizing fandom, online friction, relentless comment section wars. Balancing that equation meant asking, is the spotlight worth the distortion? When cause and optics collide, the cause has to win. So, another polite no went through official channels, quietly but firmly. Inside their inner circle, that decision reverberated louder than it should have. Because when you're used to the world bending slightly in your direction, resistance feels like betrayal. Crisis control engaged immediately. Publicists drafted alternative explanations. Maybe the timeline was too tight. Maybe the sponsors preferred to allocate funds differently. Maybe they declined out of environmental consciousness. But those who had touched the actual correspondence knew the truth. The denial wasn't logistics, it was principle. Lines of privilege shifting within a single email thread. The moment felt symbolic, heavier than dollars and flight plans. Fame stops feeling secure once gatekeepers stop flinching at saying no. For Harry, this reality bit deeper. He had walked away from royal life seeking autonomy, only to discover autonomy doesn't guarantee reverence. Validation doesn't import easily from palaces to production companies. And that's a lesson no title prepares you for. Observers started pointing out a pattern. Harry speaks of independence, but often expects automatic access. He left a monarchy chasing freedom while trying to maintain the spotlight glow that monarchy once ensured. And Meghan, the driving force behind presentation, fights the same paradox. She wants reinvention, but on her own glamorous terms. Together, they crave relevance unmarred by scrutiny. Unfortunately, relevance doesn't obey orders. It responds to authenticity. The jet denial encapsulated all of it. It wasn't rebellion from the foundation or cruelty from organizers. It was reality adjusting expectations. Titles, celebrity, past prestige, none could purchase automatic compliance anymore. That subtle shift matters. In power equations built on visibility, losing unearned privilege isn't a thunderclap, it's a dimming. You notice it only when the room feels quieter than it used to. Industry insiders began admitting what many had privately suspected. Influence has a shelf life unless constantly renewed through genuine substance. Attention sustained solely by controversy eventually collapses under fatigue. The No in New York demonstrated that fatigue firsthand. Foundations, sponsors, even sympathetic media had started calculating risk versus reward more cautiously. The Sussex brand, still strong in recognition, had weakened in persuasion. The equation had changed from their attendance increases our visibility to their demands might overshadow our cause. Once that threshold tips, negotiation leverage disappears. And that's exactly what happened. When the night of the New York Gala finally arrived, there was no roar of turbines overhead, no motorcade slicing through the city. Instead, a discreet black SUV drifted through evening traffic, unnoticed by most pedestrians. No spectacle, no cinematic entrance. Inside that quiet car, the atmosphere must have been dense. This was supposed to be their grand reset, the event reclaiming admiration, restoring that magnetic public interest. Instead, it had begun with a denial that exposed deeper cracks. They arrived like everyone else, cameras clicking politely as they stepped out. There were flashes, but not the feverish swarm from earlier years. It was respect, not obsession. And for two people accustomed to obsession, respect can sound suspiciously like silence. In earlier times, the Sussex presence could anchor an entire evening's coverage. Entire news cycles orbited around what they wore, what they said, how they looked at each other. But that night's photos captured routine, not rarity. Photographers took their shots, glanced at the screens, and moved on. The red carpet lacked that tremor of excitement that used to accompany them. It functioned like clockwork coverage, an occupational task instead of a thrill. That shift matters. When you've built your identity around being the event, blending into it feels like a demotion. Fame's gravitational pull fades gradually, then suddenly. The hum of attention that once pushed forward begins flowing toward newer stories, fresher faces, louder controversies. The gala went on smoothly, But under that glamour lay an almost imperceptible realization. The world wasn't watching as intently as before. Once inside the venue, they played their parts flawlessly. Handshakes, practiced smiles, gracious nods, the exact professionalism expected of seasoned public figures. On the surface, nothing seemed wrong. But every room has an emotional temperature, and this one had cooled. Years back, an appearance like this would have anchored coverage. Now it was part of the montage. The narrative lens had widened, and they were simply two more honored guests among many. Observers reading those subtle cues sensed a bigger story beneath the politeness. Influence without renewal becomes nostalgia. When you stop being a cultural surprise, you become an update. Somewhere between those flashes and that polite applause, something quietly closed. The denial of that private jet wasn't about travel after all. It became a symbol of every privilege that no longer automatically applied. The fixed route, the unfiltered cameras, the absence of special treatment, all reminders that power built on fascination eventually becomes negotiable. That night, the gala ended gracefully. Speeches finished, applause rolled, photos uploaded, timelines updated. Outside, the city hummed as it always does. Nothing extraordinary, nothing cinematic. A regular evening, perfectly ordinary, and that ordinariness screamed louder than any scandal could. In the age of constant stimulation, indifference registers as the ultimate loss. You can recover from criticism, you can't recover from disinterest. The grounded jet, still on the tarmac miles away, carried meaning beyond its physical stillness. It represented celebrity stripped of exemption, prestige waiting for substance to catch up. Attention resembles fuel, useful, addictive, rapidly consumed. Without genuine purpose, it burns faster than you realize. The applause that once felt endless begins tapering off until all that's left is polite acknowledgement. For years, Harry and Meghan shaped their own story, defining themselves through statements, documentaries, podcasts, and interviews. Some of it resonated deeply, much of it divided opinion. But repetition eventually exhausts empathy. Once the audience senses the narrative looping, curiosity slips into fatigue. Now, the question has shifted. What are they building beyond the story? When attention isn't guaranteed, what remains? Because legacy can't run on publicity alone. It needs tangible motion, something separate from headlines, measurable even when no cameras click. The irony is striking. The Humanitarian Awards were meant to celebrate service without spectacle, and in denying that jet, the organizers defended the spirit of the cause better than any speech could. The Sussex episode accidentally illustrated the event's core message: humility grounded in authenticity. A reminder that humility can't be rehearsed, that real credibility grows where image management ends. In that sense, the no they received wasn't punishment, it was invitation, a chance to reset on real terms instead of optics. The world wasn't turning on them, it was merely recalibrating, assessing value through a quieter lens. For Harry, independence without inherited respect feels emptier than expected. For Meghan, influence without unanimous applause feels colder than planned. But evolution usually starts with discomfort. Losing automatic privilege doesn't erase potential, it exposes room for growth. If they choose to rebuild around genuine contribution, grounded presence rather than curated perfection, the story might shift again. Audiences can forgive inconsistency faster than they forgive insincerity. The question moving forward isn't whether they remain famous, it's whether they can make fame meaningful again. As dawn rose after the gala, their SUV slipped away just as quietly as it had arrived. No cheering crowd, no viral frenzy, just city lights flickering on rain-glazed streets. Maybe that silence was the point life had been trying to make all along, that noise doesn't equal importance and calm doesn't equal failure. Sometimes losing control of the narrative is how you rediscover authenticity within it. The world won't always look. The cameras won't always follow. But legacy isn't measured by how many lenses you command. It's measured by how you act when they're gone. So yes, that jet stayed on the ground that night. But symbolically, perhaps that was grounding in every sense. A pause between the glitter and the grind. A reset between what used to be and what could still become. Influence detached from humility is turbulence waiting to happen. The grounded jet might be remembered as the moment Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's story stopped being about entitlement and started being about evolution, if they decide to write that next chapter. And maybe that's the unexpected beauty of the quiet ending. Not everything has to land in drama. Some truths land softly, rearranging perspective one realization at a time. Wild ride, right? The night that was meant to cement a comeback instead ended up sending a message louder than any press release. Privilege without purpose loses altitude fast. Attention fades when meaning stalls. But growth starts when glamour lands, when the engines quiet down and you realize the runway is long enough for something new. If you've made it this far, hit like, share your take below, and keep your notifications on for more deep dive breakdowns into power, image, and reality. Because the next chapter, theirs and ours, is always waiting on the runway, ready to take off for real.